This is the Governance Committee meeting, and I'm going to ask Adam to take all of the required steps to formally open the meeting. Good morning, Mr. Hilton.
Thank you, Ken. First, I note that Mr. Robert Mujica was named Director of the Division of the Budget effective January 13, 2016, replacing Mary Beth LeBate. I note that Todd Sherman, representing Mr. Mujica, is participating in the meeting via video conference from the New York State Division of Budget Conference Center at the Capitol Building, room 131 in Albany. I also note that Elaine, do we have Elaine over there?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Well, we don't have Elaine yet. I'll ask for motions and seconds to call to order the January 28, 2016 Governance Committee meetings of the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency, and the Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation. I have motions for HFA and AHC in second.
So moved.
Second.
Motion for Sunny May in a second. Motions for MBBA and TSFC in a second.
So moved.
So, second.
Thank you. Please note that Steve Weiss is the Governance Committee Chairman for HFA and AHC and will chair the committee meetings for HFA and AHC. Ken Bialo is the Chairman for MBBA and TSFC and will chair the committee meetings for MBBA and TSFC. Commissioner Rubin is the Chairman for Sunny May and will chair the committee meeting for Sunny May. All items are presented to each committee throughout today's meetings. Those motions and seconds, as you know, will be used unless specifically called for a different vote, or unless any committee member wishes to report his or her vote differently. For purposes of convenience and to make sure the meetings of the respective agencies go smoothly, items shared by one or more of our agencies will be presented by MBBA TSFC Committee Chairman, Mr. Bialo.
All righty, everybody. Item number 1 on the agenda is minutes. So, the following minutes shall be deemed approved absent corrections from the members and directors present. The 45th HFA Governance Committee members meeting held on December 10th, 2015. The 42nd AHC Governance Committee members meeting held on December 2015. The 45th Sony May Governance Committee Directors Meeting held on December 10th, 2015. The 40th MBBA Governance Committee Directors Meeting held on December 10th, 2015. And the 38th SFC Governance Committee Members Meeting held on December 10th, 2015. Anybody have any comments or corrections on the minutes? All right, there being none, we shall move on to item number 2. Resolution recommending the approval of board self-evaluation. Adam, I think this is up to you.
Okay, you have in your materials a memo reflecting the summary of the board's self-evaluations which have been completed pursuant to the Public Authorities Law. These need to be filed annually, and that will occur later in January. A summary was provided to you of the contents of the self-evaluation forms, and we seek a resolution permitting their filing to demonstrate that the board continues to function properly. Absent any questions, I can ask for a resolution.
Yeah, are there any comments or concerns with respect to the self-evaluation data?
Nope.
I notice there aren't too many people who are, if you will, to the right of somewhat agree, which I think reflects well on the operation of the board, Mr. Chairman, and the committees as well. All righty.
I just had a question. Were there any specific comments provided by the people who somewhat disagreed?
No, there were boxes checked.
That's it? Okay.
Now before
Alrighty.
all 5 committees is a resolution of the governance committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, the State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency, Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation approving board self-evaluations, assuming the first and second previously entered for all 5 committees. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
Item number 3, resolution recommending the review and approval of the agency's mission statements. Again, Adam, this is yours.
This is another annual requirement under the Public Authorities Law that we re-examine the mission statements and publish a self-evaluation based on the stated measurements. You receive materials that lay out the mission statements as well as reports as to how we've been performing pursuant to the mission statements, and the resolution seeks authorization to publish these materials and demonstrate how the authorities are accomplishing their missions. So, absent any questions or comments, we can pursue the resolution.
Well, I have to say, just a comment in passing, that it looks like HFA and MBBA have done a lot of good things this year. I don't see much mention of the MBBA or the TSFC. And I'm hoping next year we'll do good things and we'll show up on the report.
Yeah.
Yes, sir? Yeah, well, okay. When I said we weren't doing good things, I didn't mean to say that we weren't collecting what we were owed. Or paying what we owe.
Right,
Yeah.
priority. Just a quick question on this. These are listed as the 2015 mission statements. Is this backward-looking or forward-looking?
It's backward.
Okay.
Not in my papers here. Okay. Any comments or concerns? If not, Adam, would you hold the roll?
Now before all 5 committees is a resolution of the governance committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, the State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency, and the Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation, reviewing agency mission statements, assuming the first and second previously entered for all 5 committees. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
Item number 4, resolution recommending the approval of acquisition, disposition, and inventory guidelines and reports. There are no comments, and I doubt there are. Then I think it would be appropriate, Adam, for you to call the roll.
Okay, so this is on consent. Now before HFA, Sunny May, and MBBA committees is a resolution of the governance committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency concerning the agency's property disposition guidelines, an annual inventory and property disposition report, assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, Sunny May, and MBBA committees. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
Item number 5, resolution extending Sony May consultant contract with Doug Dilla Consulting LLC. I don't know anything about this, but if anybody does and wants to talk about it, feel free. If not, Adam,
Yes. It's another
proceed to
consent
call the
item.
roll.
Okay. Now before the Sunny May Governance Committee is a resolution of the Governance Committee of the State of New York Mortgage Agency reviewing and approving the continued retention of the consulting service contract with Doug Dilla Consulting LLC, assuming the first and second previously entered for Sunny May. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
The next item on the list is item 6, annual review of legal services contract with firms on the agency's non-bond counsel panel. Does anybody have any comments on that? If not, I do know something about this, but I don't have any comments. Does anybody have any comments? If not, then I suggest, Adam, I'm just looking for my firm to see if we're okay. No, good, okay. Adam,
Yeah, now before the HFA, AHC, and Sunny May Governance Committees is a resolution of the Governance Committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, and the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, authorizing contracts for legal services, assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, AHC, and Sunny May. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
all righty. There is no unfinished business apparently, so may we have motions and seconds to adjourn each of the 5 agencies, members and directors, governance committee meeting.
Assuming the first and second previously entered for all committees, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried and the meetings are adjourned. The next governance committee meetings are scheduled to meet on Thursday, April 14, 2016 at 8 a.m. Thank you.
we slide into the next group, Adam? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, disposed of that in about 12 minutes. So we are now headed.
So,
We are now headed.
We are on a roll.
That may not be the record, but it's good. We're now headed into the audit committee meetings of the agencies. I'm going to turn things over to Adam, who will open the meetings formally.
Okay, thank you, Ken. First, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Janet Overstein, our new control officer. Janet, stand up for a second. Folks should have her resume. We're going to take a fresh look at our internal control systems across HCR, look at risk, compliance, and related issues. You'll see Janet has an extensive background, a CPA, certified fraud examiner, has an MBA. So it's great to have Janet on board, and you'll be seeing more of her in front of the audit committee over time. As we start the meeting, I note that.
Could I just add one thing? So I want to echo what Adam said. You could probably tell from the excitement in Adam's voice that this was a huge ad for our agency. Janet comes with a terrific background, but really, in a lot of ways, more important, I think this is a I don't know if it's a first, but it's another down payment on our commitment, and really, it's driven by Adam, frankly, on our commitment to internal controls, internal risk management. Taking, as he said, a really hard look at what we do on the control side of this agency. We have terrific people. I see Gary in the audience, for example. We have terrific people who are responsible for controls at every part of the agency, and they also have about 10 other jobs that they're responsible for. And Adam, when he came in here, based on drawing on his recent background, fixing a big chunk of the world that was in distress post-2008 financial crisis, understood that that was something that you can't leave until you have a problem. You have to get way ahead of it. So Janet is a down payment on that. I expect you're going to see more activity along those lines in the days and weeks to come. But this is one of these things that it's a hire that can go unnoticed, and I think the absolute best outcome is that many of you never hear from Janet again, because it means she's doing her job the right way. So thanks Adam, for pushing us to do this. Welcome, Janet.
Thanks for those comments.
Can I make a comment also? The audit committee relies very heavily, as everybody who's been around the audit committee for a long time, on the integrity of the numbers here. And I've been here a long time, 15 years or 16 years, and haven't seen any issues that were not easily dealt with. Everything operates very well. We welcome Janet as a control officer, is sort of an odd title, but Adam assures me that it's not been recognized by the agency's budget authority. And if that's so, then so be it. But we have a great staff here.
Absolutely.
Steve, Topi, and Gary do a great job and have done a great job for us for a long time. And I'm hoping that Janet will be a contributor along with them, and that we will continue to have the really superb performance that we have in these agencies in terms of the integrity of the numbers and the ability for the board and the audit committee to rely on what we see as the real thing. So I'm hoping Janet will join in the contribution here, and we look forward to working with her.
Thanks, Ken. And just so people know, Janet's role extends beyond the authorities also to the DHCR agency, and as well as addressing financial risk issues, we'll be looking at operational risk issues. So going forward with the meeting, I note that Mr. Robert Mujica was named Director of the Division of the Budget effective January 13, 2016, replacing Mary Beth LeBate. Note that Todd Sherman, representing Mr. Mujica, and Christopher Curtis, representing Commissioner Jerry Boone from Taxation and Finance, are participating in the meeting via video conference from the New York State Division of Budget Conference Center at the Capitol Building, room 131 in Albany. And we have Elaine? Yes. I also note that Elaine McCann from the Division of Budget is attending the meeting. I will ask for motions and seconds to call to order the January 28, 2016 Audit Committee meetings of the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the State of New York Bond Bank Agency, and the Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation. I have motions for HFA and AHC and seconds.
So moved.
So moved.
Oh, what?
A motion for Sunny May and a second. And a motion for MBBA and TSFC in a second.
Look, buddy, I get to do all the moving around here.
Linda?
Not on the audit committee.
You're not on the audit committee. Okay, so moved.
As items are presented to each committee throughout today's meetings, these motions and seconds will be used unless specific items call for a different vote, or unless any committee member or director wishes to record his or her vote differently. Note that Mr. Ken Bialo is the Audit Committee Chairman for MBBA and TSFC and will chair the committee meetings for MBBA and TSFC. Commissioner Rubin is the Audit Committee Chairman for the HFA and AHC Audit Committees and will chair the committee meetings for HFA and AHC. Mr. Anthony Bergamo is the Audit Committee Chairman for Sunny May, and in his absence, Commissioner Rubin will chair the committee meeting for Sunny May. For purposes of convenience, to make sure the meetings of the respective agencies go smoothly, items shared by one or more of our agencies will be presented by MBBA TSFC Chairman Mr. Bialo.
We should probably say that we're all wishing Tony Bergamo well, obviously. Hope to see him.
Good guy.
Very good,
Good guy.
terrific guy, and a long-time excellent contributor to all these committees and to the agency's business.
Do you want to?
Sounds like it wants a backstory.
He's been ill in connection with some after effects of serving after 9/11 with the recovery.
Thank you. Alrighty, item number 1, the following minutes shall be deemed approved absent corrections from members and directors. So we have the 58th HFA Audit Committee Members Meeting held December 10th, 2015, 52nd AHC Audit Committee Members Meeting held on December 10th, 2015, the Sony May Audit Committee Directors Meeting held on December 10th, 2015, the 45th MBBA Audit Committee Directors Meeting held on December 10th, 2015, and I think, Adam, this is supposed to be the 44th TSFC, believe it or not, because it says at the top of the first page on tab E, the 44th meeting.
We will correct it.
So,
I'm really worried that you knew that, okay? It's all right.
I really hate that. I hate when people give typo corrections somewhere buried in their documents, really annoying. Nevertheless, since this is a matter of public record, we'll call it the 44th TSFC Audit Committee Members Meeting held on December 10th, 2015. Adam, I'm sorry, are there any comments or concerns about the minutes, any corrections? If not, Adam, these are deemed approved, am I correct?
Yes.
All right. Item number 2. Resolution recommending the approval of the agency's financial statements and schedule of investments for the fiscal year 2015. Mr. Gary, where's Mr. Gary? Mr. Gary, would you care to discuss this item, please? This is HFA, Sony May, MBBA, and TSFC.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to kick it off. Good morning.
Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm going to go through the agency highlights for 2015. There should be a one-page on your screen, I think it is, that have these highlights listed.
Yep, there it is.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to stress that these numbers on this highlight sheet are calendar year versus the numbers in the PowerPoint presentation, which are based on fiscal year. And that will provide in-depth analysis of these points that I'm going to go through. I'm happy to say that once again, we are the top housing issuer in the nation with a combined issuance of HFA and Sunny May, totaling $2.5 billion in 2015. HFA alone issued $2.1 billion in bonds, funding 36 new and 13 existing projects with 7,300 units, of which 58% were affordable, and 1,377 were Mitchell-Lama units. HFA continued to adjust the multifamily volume cap preservation structure, which was launched in 2014, to expand its flexibility. HFA maximized the use of the state volume cap preservation structure, volume cap by refunding $275 million of HDC and HFA bonds into 10 HFA projects. Sunny Mae issued $420 million of bonds to fund 1,417 mortgages and generated about $30 million in savings. Our mortgage-backed programs, Conventional Plus and HFA Plus, financed 241 mortgages totaling $54 million. Sunny Mae continues to service the underserved communities as 60% of our loans were made to home buyers with incomes of 80% AMI or less, and 26% of the loans were made to minority home buyers. Sunny Mae reallocated about $30.3 million notional amount of swaps to other unhedged variable rate bonds, as variable rate bonds were redeemed or refunded. Sunny Mae MIF issued commitments to insure 131 multifamily mortgage loans totaling over $700 million, which financed 13,061 units. MWBE firms processed 29.3% or $3 billion of the agency's $10.56 billion in investment transactions. AHC awarded $32.3 million to create or preserve 1,642 low to moderate income housing units located in 46 of the 62 New York counties. Our administrative expenses for the combined agencies were 2.4% under budget, and the agency's MWBE calendar year achievements were as follows: 27.35% for procurement, 15% for construction, and 11.1% for bond-related transactions. Thank you, and I want to thank my staff and all the other units that worked together to put together the presentation that we're going to kick off with in that PowerPoint package that we handed out. Daryl Johnson, my deputy, is going to start with the first couple of pages there.
Good morning. I'm going to briefly explain the two slides in the financial overview presentation on page 4. The first slide on page 4 provides a comparison of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position for each of our 4 agencies. Net position represents the sum of assets and deferred outflows of resources, less liabilities and deferred inflows of resources. The change in net position is the revenue less the expenses for each agency. For fiscal 2015, each agency except TSSC had a net positive change in net position. A positive change in net position ultimately strengthens the agency's ability to fulfill its missions. In the case of TFSC, faculty settlement revenues decreased by about $59 million in fiscal 2015 as compared to 2014. Pledged tobacco settlement revenues are contingent on tobacco sales, which cannot be predicted and will fluctuate from year to year. Additionally, amortization of deferred charges increased by about $56 million. So together, the combination of decreased revenues and increased expenses account for the negative change in net position for fiscal 2015. The second slide provides a 3-year comparison of net position by agency. Each agency's net position is trending upward with the exception of TFFC, as previously explained. In the case of MBBA, although the agency shows a net deficit of approximately $7.2 million for fiscal 2015, this is primarily a paper deficit and has no impact on the agency's ability to pay debt service to its bondholders or meet any of its financial obligations. finally, it's important to realize that net position is a balance sheet residual, similar to retained earnings in private sector financial statements, whereas change in net position is an income statement residual, similar to net P&L in private sector financial statements. So unless anybody has any questions, we'll move on to municipal markets, which will be presented by Mary.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Does this document go to the agency's budget office?
I don't think so,
Does this
no.
go outside the agencies? No. This is the only question I'm asking.
It's just for the PowerPoint, for the presentation today.
Okay. All right. Because the comments that you made about explaining the TSFC situation and the MEBA situation don't appear in the PowerPoint, so if it goes outside the agency, it's kind of
Right.
what's actually happening here, gee whiz, are these guys going down the tubes?
Right.
So if it were to go outside the
Right.
confines of the agencies, one would want to have those explanations, so that,
So-
Well, the explanations are in the financial statements as well as some of the budget documents, but this is just for today's
okay,
presentation, just a PowerPoint to show you.
that's fine, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Here's where good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Here's where I try to give you, in 5 minutes or less, an overview of 2015, so you can think about our results in the context of the world in which we were operating. So bear with me. Big themes for 2015, if everybody remembers, it was a year of sort of sitting and waiting for the Fed to act, which they finally did in December, based on unemployment dropping to levels that they found comfortable. So there's a 25 basis point increase in December, first hike in 10 years. And there's some expectation this year that it might continue, though maybe not soon, given everything that happened in a very active January of China running into trouble, stock market running into trouble, and oil, just dropping in price so precipitously that it's really affecting lots of different economies. In terms of the housing sector, it's kind of an interesting year in single-family homes. Single-family homes sales were largely down during the year up until December, when there was a pretty steep increase. I haven't seen it in writing, but it's hard for me to say like that Fed increase didn't somewhat like encourage everybody to jump in the market before rates started to trend upward. But that's just this girl's speculation about what might have happened. The other thing I'd say about home buying that I found somewhat interesting is that in the December market, 16% of those sales were to investors, not to home buyers. And the reason that kind of stuck in my head a little bit was that I was also reading a report by the Joint Center for Housing Studies, and it said that of the rental stock nationally, 40% of rental stock is single-family homes. So there had been a big push, I can think of a better word for it, by investors, even organized REIT investors, to buy single-family homes during the downturn and rent them out. Home ownership, and maybe because of that, continues to be at a pretty all-time low of 63% in the country. And we're seeing that as, rent levels are rising, people are having trouble, and student loan debt is still pretty considerable. So people are having somewhat trouble putting together down payments, and housing prices are increasing. In terms of interest rate, it was a year of a lot of volatility, but we kind of ended up right back where we started for the most part in terms of both treasury rates and muni rates. Rates stayed in somewhat of a band in both sectors, both treasuries and munis. And I think for us as an issuer, they're still fairly low, and we're still looking for every opportunity we can to go in and refund any debt that we have that's callable, where there's a benefit to us, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. In Sunny May, where we did so. Investors, net inflows for investors in the muni markets We're up $13 billion, though this was a decrease from what flowed in last year. And short-term rates are at historical lows, and this is important on the Sunny Mae side, although we do have swaps. We do have about 20% of our borrowings in floating rate, and so we're enjoying those historical low rates there as well. Muni issuance was up 17.3% last year. Somewhat over 50% of that was refundings, everybody going in and mining those opportunities. What would I say about that? It looked like it was going to be a bigger year. I think there was some speculation we'd get to about 400 million. We didn't get there. Whether we do so this year or not, I think is anybody's guess. But this is well within the range of historic last 20 years or so to be somewhat in the 300 million range, 300 plus million. In terms of housing did see a big increase, 23% increase, largely due to what was happening in the single-family market. A lot of single-family issuers, state housing agencies, really, but for a handful of us, the two New York agencies, California, perhaps Florida, Massachusetts, most state housing finance agencies are really single-family issuers, more so than multifamily, for a variety of reasons, and the single-family muni market started to make sense again. We've been, with the Fed really keeping Treasury rates low and conventional rates for mortgages being priced off Treasury rates, the muni market, which is where we borrow, couldn't really compete with those low rates. This is a year where it looked like we were starting to turn the corner of that, and a lot of single-family issuers came back in the market. As Sheila said in the highlights, number one housing issuer in the nation by a pretty large percentage. This year, we were about 15.5% of all issuance. That includes both our tax-exempt and taxable issuance. So when I think also what really were the big themes of our last year, we saw a huge increase in the amount of private placements we did, particularly for the 80/20s. And this was true both for the starting 80/20s and the 80/20s that were moving from construction to permanent financing. I think I mentioned this to the board before. A lot of commercial banks are just not interested in issuing letters of credit. The capital charges for them are too expensive. And if they take the loan in-house, there's better capital treatment. So we still have partners at the table, but those deals are looking somewhat different than they had previously. Not from a risk profile to the agency, just in terms of the way we structure it. It was also a big year for the governor raining riches on the housing sector here in New York. The governor's been a big supporter of housing efforts, and last year we saw an increase in CIF funds, which are community investment funds. You'll see there's a project in the board book today in HFA that is using those funds. More housing trust fund. We launched a middle income program, which was a really big hit around the state, which allows us in many places to start to do mixed income housing, especially important in communities where there's a concentration of poverty, give those areas a little bit of room to bounce should markets improve there, and also to help more suburban communities be accepting of some low-income housing in their communities by offsetting it with what we sometimes call workforce housing. And we're also launching a neighborhood revitalization program on the Sunny Mae side to help areas hard hit by foreclosure. It was a year of limited volume cap in New York State, and so both on the HFA side and the Sunny Mae side, we did issue taxable bonds where we could, and took advantage of whatever recycling and refunding opportunities we have. And to talk about refunding opportunities, what a great segue. This is always your favorite, Andy, right? I'm ready for you.
No.
So we issued 420 million total of Sunny Mae bonds in 2015, of which 146 million were refunding. That was 35% of everything we did. Generated approximately 30 million in present value savings, or
What's the percentage?
I know, I have it right here. In the two deals, one issue where we issued 73 million of refunding bonds, 25% savings, huge. The other issue, 73 million of refunding bonds, 15.7 million. 15.7% savings, huge savings.
Very good.
We'll continue to do that where we can. Any questions?
I have a question. I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking about the limited volume cap, but can you just speak for a second about how you think we're doing with the 80/20s and the revised program that would only fund the affordable piece?
That's all we're doing.
And also, what your thoughts or concerns might be if interest rates begin to rise and how we, as an agency, might have to commit more resources to
Okay,
this.
so two different questions. So the 80/20s, if you look at the a little more, it's about 2.1 that we issued at HFA. Somewhat over 900 million of that was taxable. So huge, like really big shift. I mean, we would have never done as many deals as we did. That was, a big chunk of that was taxable. So people are still interested in the financing. We have a couple of deals that may happen this year. I think on 80/20s for 21A is really the big unknown. How many new deals are gonna come? I don't know. There are a couple of deals that got their footings in the ground by the end of last year. That still may happen. For me, that's a question mark in terms of what we're likely to see on a going forward basis. Rising interest rates, yes, to the extent we've been able to pretty much keep our HFA lending rates, within a band. All of last year, if rates were to go up significantly, obviously, we're gonna need more soft money because the rates the revenues from the project certainly don't go up in a rising rate environment. So it's something that we will monitor. It's hard to say, though, given what's happening in the economy, that it's something that I'm really worried about for the first half of the year. Really looks, like things are somewhat gonna hold steady. The muni market is still doing well. There's a couple of credit concerns out there, but Puerto Rico, Illinois, et cetera, but it really hasn't affected either New York issuance or the housing sector.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up on the first of the two questions? Is there any way to track whether the shift in policy has actually freed up any volume cap? I mean, I think part of the idea was to shift.
Yes,
So are we looking at that?
yes, of course.
Any sense? I mean, it's
Well,
obviously early.
well, if you think about the I guess a couple of things. Big picture, if you think about that $900 million of taxable debt, one might say, oh, that's debt that maybe we would have issued on a tax-exempt basis, or not for this. You could also make the argument that with that amount of demand, maybe we wouldn't have funded as many projects. So I guess I'd say what's happened is that we've been able to create more affordable housing by doing that.
Great.
Right? It has to have.
Good.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sheila, thank you. Marion, thank you. Daryl, thank you. Gary, you want to continue on here for a bit?
Sure. The next two slides just kind of go along with what Marion and Sheila were discussing about, it shows a 5-year comparison of bonds issued for fiscal years for all the entities, and the amount of bonds outstanding by each of the entities at the end of the current fiscal year, which these numbers from our financial statements are on a fiscal year basis. And now Sherry is doing the Senate presentation.
Good morning. So I wanted to talk to you all about the Sunny Bay, what we did in 2015. And we had a pretty big year. We went up in volume. We did 600 more loans than we had done in 2014, 1,471 loans. And our production in terms of purchase volume was 239 million, a little over 100 million above what we had done the previous year. And the big story is our reservations had gone up from 158 million in 2014 to 461 million. So that's just showing there's about a 90 to 120 day lag from when a loan is reserved until when it's purchased. So it shows kind of the momentum that we had going into this year as well. The next slide is to highlight kind of really at this point where we're positioned from an interest rate perspective is primarily what's driving our volume. We are working hard on developing some niche programs that are really targeted in terms of assisting underserved populations and also working on improving our technology in order to level the playing field so that the rate isn't so much of a driver. But as you can see here, when the Sunny Mae production dipped below market interest rates is really what showed that big explosion in volume. And so then, as Sheila mentioned in the highlights, we are continuing to try to focus on the underserved populations and the low and moderate income buyers. So we had almost 60% of our buyers were 80% AMI or lower, and 26%, almost 30% of our borrowers were minority. In terms of delinquencies, we've continued to perform better than New York State average pretty significantly. The state average right now is 7.9%, and ours is 4.64%. We did, for the first time, cross the national average. We're still right about where it was, and that's the product of still trying to work through the lengthy process of getting those foreclosed loans out, worked through the pipeline. But in terms of new delinquencies, we've continued to decline. So the older delinquent numbers are out there just languishing, but there's not new delinquencies that are going up. So as I mentioned before, we're trying to increase our efficiency from a technology perspective to level the playing field with other lenders out there. And right now, the big thing is electronic delivery. Lenders are using electronic delivery to improve their efficiencies, which is necessary in a time of diminished margins. And so we had launched Sunny Mae Express under the leadership of George and Marion in the past. We worked in partnership with a technology company called Overture Technologies to develop that software. And what we found last year was there were a couple of key bugs that we were continuing to have issues resolving. So that, coupled with the fact that the Overture contract was expiring and we were looking at a rather expensive increase in their new pricing, we made the decision to purchase the software ourselves and handle the administration of it internally. That has improved our accountability and also resulted in a huge amount of increased efficiencies. So we've seen the number of days for our outstanding tickets go from 69 to 13 days. We've resolved all the major bugs that were outstanding. We now are in a position to roll the system out to more lenders. So we've had our two largest lenders actively using the system for a little over a year, and now we're in a place where we've got 7 more lenders slated to go out within the next couple of weeks. So 2 have already done their initial presentations this week, and the other 5 are on the schedule for the next 2 weeks to be rolled out. And we want to continue to aggressively get the lenders onto this, because the faster that they're using the technology, the faster that we're efficient for them to originate. We have reserved 1,181 loans so far in the system and purchased 536 loans out of there. Other things we're trying to do from a technology perspective, we've been working really hard to get our website, in a position where we want to launch a web-based marketing campaign, because that's where the bulk of home buyers are going to do their research prior to purchasing a home. And obviously, if people are looking on the web and they're learning about us on the web, the first place they're going to go is our website. We want to make sure that it's a real education center for home buyers, so that when they're getting there, it has all the information they need on creating budgets, how to get started, how to access home buyer counseling, etc. And we also are updating our seller guide. So we went to contract with Allregs, which is a company that does it's an interactive, searchable version of guidelines, and it's something that all the other major investors in the country utilize. So we're now, again, leveling the playing field where lenders are able to access our guidelines in a format that they're familiar with, and all regs will be continuing to update them in an ongoing manner. So we won't have a situation where there's a seller guide that's, you know, a number of years old and people are having to look in multiple places to find the most recent information. And we are continuing to build out our collection of classes for Sunny May University. So we added some additional classes this year. We're getting more granular in topic now at this point. There's only so many high-level basics you can do. So we've seen attendance drop off a little bit as a result of the higher intensity of the content, but we're also seeing a lot more positive impact in terms of the results that we're getting from people who are attending the trainings, because the granular information is really helpful in terms of helping them deliver quality loan files.
I'm sorry, this is training for our lender partners.
It is our lender partners, realtors, and we've also done some classes for lenders directly to consumers. So now, in terms of our mortgage-backed security volume, that has continued to go up. We're working in partnership with M&T Bank. They are the company that handles all the secondary marketing on the transactions and are also our master servicer. So we did see the production increase, but it's not as much as what we'd like to see. And this is an area of opportunity for growth. So we've been laying the groundwork for the past year. We brought an employee on to assist us in writing a quality control plan, and then to make changes to that quality control plan as CFPB implemented the new TRID guidelines in the middle of the year. We've been working on technology for loan delivery mechanisms to enable us to do quality control efficiently to get our Fannie Mae seller servicer approval. Once that happens, then we'll be able to service our own loans, and that will enable us to get the best execution on the secondary market, because we don't have that middle income that we have to accommodate. Marion mentioned our neighborhood revitalization program. Sorry, I'm just kind of flipping through. Marion mentioned our neighborhood revitalization program, and that is the program we developed to use with the Chase funds that we received. So what that initially entailed was coming up with the program itself and writing the guidelines, submitting it to DOB for approval. So we did receive that approval, and we identified all the strategic partners that we were intending to work with, from lenders, nonprofits, municipal employees, land banks, et cetera. And we had a kickoff meeting here a couple of weeks ago that was very well attended, very well received, and we've done follow-up meetings in almost all of the 10 regions that we selected for this program. So what the loan actually looks like, just in case you're curious, is we plan to use taxable bonds so that we can increase the pool of buyers that can purchase these homes. So they wouldn't be first-time home buyers only. And we're intending to use a portion of the funds to subsidize the interest rate so that we have a below market interest rate as an incentive for buyers to purchase vacant and abandoned homes. So these were targeted communities that we selected because they were hard hit by the foreclosure crisis, yet not so hard hit that they didn't have a sustainable home ownership opportunity available to them in those areas. So once we started looking at that, we figured, what are the incentives to get people to buy in those areas, and what are the necessary functions? So the incentive is obviously the below market interest rate. The necessary function is a grant for renovations, because a lot of these properties have deteriorated as a result of their vacancy. So we need to make sure that we have the capability to handle the cost of those repairs. So we're offering a $20,000 grant for the rehabilitation funds, and we specifically selected nonprofit partners that also had access to AHC money so that they would be able to partner with us, and the additional money that AHC has could bridge any additional gap that may happen as a result of increased cost of repairs that exceed the after value of the property. So we're also giving them $500 for homebuyer counseling. So we want to make sure that we're positioning them for success from the get-go. So between the grant for the renovation, the subsidized interest rate, and the homebuyer counseling money, we're hoping that we'll be able to attract buyers to go in and purchase these properties and help stop the downward spiral and stabilize these neighborhoods. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is a new initiative that we're really excited about in terms of promoting Sunny May. One of the biggest things that we have seen as a challenge is our model has traditionally been that our loans are originated through our bank partners. And so we are consistently working with the bank partners and educating them on our programs in order to give them a desire to want to originate our loans. They obviously have many options, and some options pay them more revenue to originate other programs. So we've worked really hard to kind of increase the awareness on the consumer side to drive demand for our products, so that the consumers are the ones that are aware up front and know that, hey, I know that Sunny Mae has an Achieving the Dream loan, they have a down payment assistance program, and this is what I want. So by driving that demand from the consumer level, it increases the desire of the lenders to offer the program, and it keeps the lenders from being able to steer borrowers away because they don't understand what they're missing out on by not doing a Sunny Mae loan. And so we were trying to figure out a way that we could increase consumer awareness that was mission-driven and consistent with our goals. And we went to an event last year in September that was hosted by Home Headquarters in Syracuse. And essentially what they did, they had volunteer organizations from all over the place. We actually had a group of volunteers that went, and sponsorship funds were put together so that they could do a one-day block blitz renovation of a targeted 2-block area. And essentially what they did, they identified, they reached out to the homeowners in those areas. They identified improvements that could be done to each of these homes. And from 9 to 3 p.m., 200 plus volunteers went in and painted homes, replaced front porches, took out trees, resurfaced driveways, did all kinds of additional repairs, and left this 2-block area in much better shape at the end of the day. So what we'd like to do is take the resources that we have for our marketing and increase this model so that it's done statewide. So we want to continue to hold events like this and use them as a way to increase awareness of Sunny Mae. And the goal at this point in time is to get to a place, and we'll probably be working up to it, where we're doing 10 on one spring Block Blitz Day, and then 10 in the fall for a fall Block Blitz Day. If anybody has any creative ideas for names, we're still trying to kick that around too. So feel free to let us know if you do. And so we also are looking to, as much as we can, hire veterans to assist in the labor and also the administration of the program. So we kind of wanted to, if we have the funds available for marketing and we have the goal of increasing awareness, and we know that this is something that worked very well in that community, then, to stay consistent with our mission, this is our primary marketing initiative aside from going to the web-based marketing platform this year. So that's all. Any questions?
That's great.
It's a ton of great activity. Sherry and I talked about the neighborhood revitalization program in particular, which is the new program that she launched with the Chase funds. I think it's terrific. It makes a hell of a lot of sense. I think frankly, as a newbie to the agency, I suspect that one of the problems that we have is that we've got a lot of programs that do different things, but they are different in nuance sometimes. They sort of all basically target the same kind of activity, and they just sort of sound slightly different. They have slightly different terms or whatever. And I would like to try to find ways through marketing or through targeted press or whatever to make sure that the world understands exactly what the differences are between some of these and how creative actually you and your team really are. And NRP, I think, is a perfect example of that. I mean, that is a really creative response to a very specific kind of problem. It's not the same product that we usually offer. It's taxable, all the different bells and whistles. So when you did your launch, and when the time comes to actually, execute it, which I guess is going to be soon.
Yes, within the next month or two.
Okay, we're going to really try to make sure that we get the attention from the program and our local partners that it deserves. I think it's great.
Great, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Morning.
Hey, Mike.
Morning.
The first slide shows the MIF's monthly tax surcharge collections. The MIF is funded by a surcharge of 25 cents per hundred on mortgages recorded in New York State, with the exception of single-family loans in the 12-county MTA region and Erie County. And I think reading from the right side of the chart over to the left, it shows during the fiscal crisis in 2010, the very low volume of mortgages recorded in the state, and concomitantly the low volume of mortgage recording tax received by the MIF. This was the 61 million was the lowest in recent memory, and it's increased appreciably over the last 6 years, and it's more than tripled between fiscal 2010 and fiscal 2015. So we have adequate mortgage recording tax to do a very high level of new origination of mortgage commitments. We leverage up 5 to 1, so this gives us the ability to do almost $1 billion of new commitments. The second chart, which shows project commitments by loan amount, it shows that 2015 was the best year we ever had by loan amount. It was about 700 million in loans. And there was no one big loan that skewed it. We did a lot. We did 131 separate loans. It shows that CPC represents a plurality of loans that we insure, and this is due largely to the fact that CPC is the only lender that has a buy-sell agreement with the New York State Controller. So they have the unique ability to deliver loans to the Common Retirement Fund. But many of the loans are on projects that are financed in part with DHCR 9% credits. So they're part of HCR's origination of affordable housing. And then the next slide shows project commitments by units rather than loan amount. And it also shows that with the exception of 2 anomalous loans, one an HDC loan for 14,000 NYCHA units, and then a Wells Fargo loan for 15,000 units in Co-op City, that 2015 once again was the best year we ever had in terms of number of units. This was 13,000 units, which was a standard year for us, X these 2 anomalous loans, is around 9,000 units. So this was another good year. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Batting fourth.
Good morning.
I think sixth.
Huh?
Sixth.
Say, are we a second? Oh my
but
God.
who's
Sorry,
counting?
so sorry.
The next 4 slides will focus on liquidity and swaps. At the end of the year, 452.9 million in liquidity facilities were outstanding, representing a drop of 52.1 million at the start of the year, primarily due to refundings and redemptions, which required corresponding termination of one agreement and principal adjustments to others. The chart shows the current distribution of facilities among the 5 providers. As a group, all of them continue to maintain strong credit ratings. In May of next year, all 78 million of the Barclays facility will expire, at which time we will either extend or replace. The next slide shows our current pool of swap providers, including percentage of exposure. As of year-end, 420 million of these swaps were hedging 93% of our variable rate bonds, with the remaining 7% unhedged. Viewed indenture-wide, the unhedged portions represents only 2%, falling well within the 10% unhedged parameters set by the Asset and Liability Committee of the agency. Several of these swap agreements require collateral postings under certain rating threshold. As of year-end, none of these requirements had been triggered, so no collateral posting was required. Overall, our swaps continue to provide value to the agency in the form of interest savings, which cumulatively are now in excess of 47 million. The next slide provides information on all swap reallocations completed during the year. Previously mentioned refundings and redemptions created some mismatch between swap notional amounts and certain outstanding hedge bond series requiring the reallocations as presented. These reallocations had no impact on the swap agreements, nor did it involve the counterparties. These were simply internal book transfers. At year end, all of these transfers were included in the GASB 53 effectiveness testing and deemed effective hedges. The final slide shows expected swap termination starting in April. During this year, a total of 98 million will terminate, increasing our unhedged exposure to 107.6 million, representing 7% indenture-wide. As these still fall within the 10% unhedged parameter, no action will be required. We will, however, continue our monitoring and take appropriate action should interest rate conditions warrant. This ends the presentation on liquidity and swaps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up the PowerPoint presentation with some highlights by agency prior to the independent auditor's presentation, which will come after that. Starting on slide 33 with the Sunny Mae financial highlights, a lot of this we've gone through on the other side, on the other slides. The bonds outstanding total $2.6 billion at the end of the year. New bonds issued were $420 million, which includes the refunding bonds. Mortgage loans receivable was $2.64 billion, which is a decrease of 4% from the prior year. And the state budget required the MIF to transfer $75 million to New York State and its agencies. HFA received some of that Housing Trust Fund for housing purposes that Marion had discussed before. And the mortgage recording tax was already discussed by Mike. This slide illustrates the various the biggest components of income and expense for Sunny Mae, and you can see that the interest expense has been declining over time, which is a result of the refunding bonds and lower interest rates. And the net positions have been discussed previously by Darrell on the opening slide. Now for the Housing Finance Agency, actually this is not the slide.
Are you up to me already?
Slide 37.
37. Right.
Welcome back.
I missed you guys. Big picture HFA, but I'm also going to take a moment to discuss our overall multifamily results for 2015, which includes what we've done on the DHCR part of our multifamily group. This year, 38 projects, up from last year. This was 36 bond finance projects. And due to the soft subsidy loans that have been coming to HFA through the state budget, we also did 2 standalone subsidy loans. These 2 actually were two projects in the UDC Mitchell-Lama portfolio, one of which didn't need a full refinance right now, but did have some capital needs, and another of which was refinancing on a conventional basis, but staying in Mitchell-Lama for another 40 years. I'm going to turn to a different slide, which I don't have copies of to share with you. So 2015, totally the agency financed 86 projects, so 38 of those were on HFA. 38 of those were HFA, 33 of them were 9% deals, and 15 of them were other SLIC or other subsidy sources that flowed through the DHCR side. It's a total of 11,282 units, 8,109 of which were affordable. 3,957 New York City, 354 Long Island and Westchester, and 3,198 outside New York City. So almost a 50-50 split, New York City, rest of the state. Slightly larger amount, 4,000 of 4,559 new construction, 3,550 preservation. Preservation continues to be a huge focus of ours. It's so important to keep our existing affordable housing stock there. It's a much lower cost investment for us, and the loss of any affordable unit costs about twice as much to replicate. In terms of special populations, between senior, frail elderly, and other special populations, did a total of over 2,000 units. And UDC, over 2,000 of those units too were in the 3-year mark of a 5-year plan, and we will be getting there. In terms of how we finance the HFA units, we continue to make good use of the open reso. We issued almost 330 million of open reso bonds, financed 23 of the 38 projects through the open reso, and almost 3,000 units. Open reso started in 2007. We've issued over $2.4 billion of bonds. It now contains 164 projects with over 24,000 units. I'm hoping to get to 200 this year, but to be overly optimistic. I do want to say, which I should have said earlier, I want to thank my staff, especially in debt issuance, for helping to pull together the slides. Shirley, Gloria, you guys know everybody? Shirley, Gloria, Asia. Anybody else here from debt issuance? Great team. I'm lucky to have them. I appreciate their help in pulling all of this together.
They are,
Thank you.
they're a great group, it really is. They didn't look at the slides, but they do the work also.
Yes, exactly. Not just the slides, but what.
But nice job on
there.
the slides.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, so from the financial statements, the bonds outstanding for HFA at the end of the year were $13.8 billion, and per our books, new bonds issued were $1.7 billion, financing 71 new projects with 9,826 units, of which 5,498 were affordable. Mortgage loans receivable totaled $12.5 billion, was an increase of 10% from the prior year. Fees and charges actually totaled $58.3 million. That includes all fees that came into the agency during the year, and that was an increase of 25% from the prior year.
Why was that?
There were different public purpose fees that were due upon different closings, and just the increased activity in the current year amounted to that.
We did more. And that's a mix of both the refundings to go from construction to permanent. We charge for that restructuring, and also increasing
The restricted position, Darrell already went through that at the beginning, and similar to the slide with Sunny Mae, this just shows the biggest components of income and expense, which is the interest on mortgages and interest expense, which just reflect the increased amount of activity in the year, the increased number of projects. Now, for MBBA, there were no bonds issued in the current year. The bonds outstanding were $543 million at the end of the year. Fees and charges total $281,000 for the current year.
Are those charges that the agency charges prorates down to for administrative costs, or what administrative charge the fees determine, or how is it determined how to charge the MBBA or the TSFC?
Okay, so that first, I was showing the amount of fees that come in, which is
Okay.
at the time of closing. Not all of them pay fees. The ones, municipalities in certain bond issues are required to pay fees along with their debt service of interest on their loans each year.
So these aren't charges that are broken down by the agency to apply towards administrative costs.
No, but that's going to be discussed in the budget portion, and for MBBA, the administrative cost charge is higher than the amount of the fees that come in, but there were fees received from TSFC refundings that still remain in the MBBA operating fund, so it's sufficient to cover the amount of expenses, which is quite a bit higher than the 281,000 because most of them don't pay fees. Now, the interest on advances and the interest expense, actually the increase reflects the amortization of bond premiums included in interest expense. So again, like Dara was saying before about the deficit, this is really the fact that the interest expense is higher is just a paper amount. It's not the amount that's actually paid out for interest expense, which you'd see in the cash flow to the financial statements. TSFC, the bonds outstanding are 1.5 billion at the end of the year, and the amount that we have on our books is a deferred charge, which represents the amount due from New York State to cover these bonds, is 1.4 billion, of which we amortize 351 million in the current year using the bonds outstanding method. Now, there was a lot of the tobacco settlement revenue declined in the current year, but that's really tobacco settlement revenue and other because it included the amount of disputed claims that were paid in fiscal 2014 were included in there, and there were a lot less disputed claim funds coming in fiscal 2015. And one of the things that happened was because of the disputed claims that came in 2014, there was more funds in the tobacco accounts than we were permitted to call in bonds by the bond indenture. So more bonds were called in 2015. So a little bit of a mismatch between the revenue that came in and the amount that we called in bonds because we had to wait a period of time to pay that. And also the Lehman Brothers money, the settlement money that came in was $2 million in fiscal 15, but we got $21.2 million to date. It was about $19 million in the prior year. The next slide compares the scheduled debt service due compared to the actual. The amount that we anticipated is high from the original OS, and it also included the disputed claims, which have not come out of the schedule. But you could always see that the amount of debt service that is scheduled without making any additional calls is always higher than the amount that we actually receive, the red line compared to the blue. And actually, if you look at the tobacco bonds only really go out, including all calls that we make, until about 2019, 2020 is about the time when all the bonds are projected to be paid off.
At the current MSA
Right.
payment rates.
Exactly.
So if cigarette consumption continues to decline, current payment rates will not be maintained under the master settlement agreement.
Right, but I don't think it would go, I mean, it won't go out too much further because it's getting close to it.
Yeah, between big NPM adjustment this year, settlement with New York State. As Gary said, the money left in the account last year that we weren't able to use to call bonds about 2 years
So
ago.
we're aiming to be rid of these bonds, I'm sorry, Mary, we're aiming to be rid of these bonds by when? Pay them off?
I want to say 2017, 2018.
That's what I thought, okay. And that still looks achievable. Thank you.
And the next slide just again summarizes the primary components of the revenue and expenses, the tobacco settlement revenue and the interest expense and the earnings. And now I'd like to bring up from Ernst & Young, Lou Roberts, partner, and Amy Chang, manager on the job, and they'll be presenting the audit results from the management level.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Just want to call your attention to this presentation that should be on your laptop. It's our audit results. As you heard from the accounting and finance team, the agencies have had a very active year in the market, very good year. And I just want to point out to be here within 90 days of fiscal year end with 4 completed audited financial statements is a great accomplishment. So I just want to thank Sheila and her team for staying on track and getting us to the goal line here. You could turn to page 1 after the table of contents, the executive summary. This was prepared a few days ago for the mailing. At this point, we've completed all of our procedures. We did obtain the signed representations from management. We performed our subsequent events procedures. So we will be issuing an unmodified opinion on all 4 of the financial statements, which means it's a clean opinion. As it relates to the audit of AHC, that will commence in April as it's a March 31 year end. The single audit is in process. We'll be performing the single audit over HFA. This year, when we took a look at the schedule of expenditures for federal awards for Sunny May, they were below the threshold that requires an A133 audit, so we don't have to perform that audit this year. As it relates to the scope of our audit, it's consistent with the plan that we presented to the audit committees back in September. As far as results, all of the footnotes have the proper disclosures. There is one additional footnote in the financial statements this year, and it has to do with the implementation of GASB 68, which is the recording of the pension liabilities. The liability that was recorded on Sunny May and HFA was not material. It was like $900,000 for one and $700,000 for the other, so it wasn't a significant account, but we did include the disclosures within the financial statements. There were no uncorrected misstatements or material corrected misstatements. We did have some audit adjustments that were deemed not material, but we did bring them to management's attention, and we did include some recommendations within the management letter that we'll get to in a little bit. The entity level controls and other internal controls over financial reporting are designed and operating effectively. And I just also want to point out that Amy and I had the pleasure of meeting with Janet earlier this week. So we look forward to working with her and sharing with her our knowledge of the internal controls and any documentation that would help her, get off the ground running. And again, within a short period of time, we received outstanding cooperation and communication from all of the agencies. And Sheila and Daryl were very on top of things. We had weekly updated status meetings, so kept us on track. And they were down a few folks this year in the accounting department. So to get to this point, down a few folks, really good accomplishment. Page 2, I'll let Amy go through each one of the areas. We won't get into all of the details, but just want to kind of review what we've looked at, which is consistent with the plan that we put forth in September.
Good morning, everybody. So as Lou said on page 2, this represents our areas of audit emphasis. In the first section, you'll see areas that we evaluated internal controls over. The first 3 processes listed here, mortgage revenue, payroll, purchases, receipts, purchases, and payables, we tested controls over. The following processes, we performed walkthroughs, obtained narratives to understand the process, and this ultimately impacted the nature and timing and extent of our substantive procedures. So moving down to interest expense, we did test the calculation of interest payments, and we vouched to payments during the year. No significant issues were noted, but we did include a recommendation in our management letter as we did identify a $1.2 million underaccrual, which we'll talk about later on. Moving to page 3, for cash and investments, mortgage loans, and the long-term debt and compliance, we did confirm directly with trustees the amounts that were recorded on the statements of net position. We also evaluated the disclosures that were included in the financial statements to make sure that they were in accordance with the GASBs. As for the interest rate swaps, we had our EY derivatives valuation group review the fair value of the interest rate swaps, and we also reviewed the inputs used by the agency's consultants for the hedge effectiveness of the swaps. Again, no significant issues were noted. We identified an immaterial difference, which we again included a recommendation in our management letter for. Litigation and loss contingencies, EY sent external confirmations to legal counsel as well as an internal legal confirmation to the agency's counsel. There were no significant issues noted, nothing that required to be disclosed in the financial statements. As far as OPEB, this is a roll forward year for 2015, so we obtained the roll forward calculation from the actuary, and we also updated the status of prior year's management letter comment for net pension obligation and related disclosures. As Lou indicated, the amounts that were required to be recorded were immaterial. We obtained the state's report, agreed the amounts that were recorded to the amounts recorded in the financials by management, and we did not note any differences. We evaluated the disclosures. Moving on to page 4 for the accrued liabilities. We tested all of the various components in the agency's liabilities. We did not identify any significant issues other than an immaterial adjustment for interest payable, which I mentioned, $8 million adjustment for transfers to the state of New York, we talk about in our management letter. The $1.2 million difference, which I spoke about earlier on interest payable, both of which were included in the management letter. Net position, we tested the classifications of the different components of net position and did not identify any issues there. We also reviewed the agency's compliance with PAAA as it relates to their investments and gave a clean opinion on their schedules of investments. And we also utilized our IT team to review IT general controls in support of our audit.
And if you can move on to page 6, this is a summary of our required communications. The details are in the following pages, but just a few items just to point out. Again, there were no material corrective misstatements. There were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We did not identify any fraud or illegal acts. We didn't have any significant difficulties encountered with performing the audit. We didn't have any disagreements with management. As you know, we subcontract with an MBE firm and a WB firm. Just one thing I wanted to point out, Mitchell & Titus is our MBE firm, and effective October 15, before that they were part of EY Global, still a separately legal firm, but they chose to discontinue that relationship as part of being EY Global. But we still have a partnership with them, not only on this account, but many other accounts, and we will continue to do so. So just wanted to bring that attention to your attention. And like I said, the details through page 15 kind of go through the required communications. On page 17, independence is always something we have to consider throughout the course of our relationship, and EY is not performing any types of services that would create an independence issue for us being auditors. Next is the management letter. As Amy and I had discussed, there were a few recommendations that we were making. Again, these are not significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. The first one relates to an audit adjustment that we identified in reconciling payments that required to be made based on the state's budget. There was a difference of about $8 million. So we recommend that there's an annual reconciliation of the budget to the activity so they can ensure that the year-end accrual is properly stated. And as you can see from management's response, they agree with our recommendation and will ensure that all accruals are posted and supported with proper documentation. The second item is accounting for derivatives. A lot of activity throughout the year, and when you have interest rate swaps with bond issues that could be refunded, there's certain accounting that's required. There again, there was nothing that we noted that required an audit adjustment, but because of you being so active in a market, we think that it would warrant, a summary schedule, just kind of like walking through what happened throughout the year, meet with accounting to ensure that everything is captured and complete. As you can see from Desmond's presentation, he's on top of the interest rate swaps. He's got a good handle on it, but we just want to make sure that the accounting department understands also what happens throughout the year so that they can make any adjustments, if necessary, in a timely manner. And third, Amy addressed a $1.2 million difference that we identified in interest rate payable, and our recommendation is just to enhance the review of the calculation, and management agrees with that, and there's going to be additional procedures put in place to verify that the accruals are properly stated. So those are the three that we have for this year. What we also include is a status of the prior year management letter recommendations. The first item that we have on page 4 of the management letter has to do with census data with respect to GASB 45. Last year, as you might recall, we identified some differences in our testing. This year, given that it's a roll forward period, there's nothing that we identified this year, but next year, given that's a new measurement period, management is going to put procedures in place to make sure that the census data is accurate and there's like a second level review. The next two have to do with IT recommendations. One had to do with migration of changes into production and application of change monitoring. We took another look at that this year. Proper procedures were put in place, and we did not identify any issues, so we consider those to be resolved as well. That really concludes our presentation. There are two other handouts that we included in the package just for thought leadership. Takeaways has to do with cybersecurity, something you may want to think about not only here, but if there's any other boards that you're on. I know it's a very hot topic, and if at any point the board would like for us to come in and spend some time do board training, we'd be more than happy to do that as well. But we just thought this would be informative for you as board members.
Thank you. Do you have an extra of those?
I have
Take
some
these.
hard copies.
Well, that'd be great. Gary, can you just make sure that we all get them? Thank you very much. Any questions, comments about financial reporting, financial status, footnotes, text, numbers? No? You guys did a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody who's involved in today's presentation. It was great.
Thank you.
So I guess,
Yep.
time to call the roll.
Now before the HFA, Sunny May, MBBA, and TSFC committees is a resolution of the audit committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency, and the Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation, approving audited financial statements for fiscal year 2015, assuming the first and second previously entered for HFA, Sunny May, MBBA, and TSFC committees. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
That's a heck of a job.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I actually want to, John Pollock put together the slides, he's here, and Henry Howe, Deputy Controller, contributed greatly to this year's closing.
Well done, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Item number 3, resolution approving internal audits information technology audit report. Steve Kirby to discuss, please.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning. I'll be brief, especially since it's taken so long. Here we reviewed the Data Operations Center and the System Internal Controls for the IT group as of October 31st of 2015. As of our audit date, there were 13 individuals in the group, which consisted of management and tech support staff. They also had 3, not vendors, but consultants, I'm sorry, that included a senior business analyst, a project manager, and a tech support specialist on staff. The IT group is responsible for ensuring the agency's operations for both the hardware computer system, software, and the PCs as well. They're responsible for the security, for systems development, program enhancements, maintaining of documentation, as well as the disaster recovery and vulnerability testing and planning. Currently, they're looking at a project to replace the agency's FoxPro system, which most of the software applications reside on. It's being done because Microsoft is no longer supporting FoxPro, and so we've issued an RFP to find an ERP solution system, and that project is called BAM, which is the Business Application Modernization Project. Our audit included a review of the security, password authorization, input-output controls, testing of transactions, as well as governance. And the result of our audit was that we were able to satisfactorily achieve our audit objectives. We didn't find any major exceptions that were noted in the report. The minor ones we were discussed and resolved. And so we're going to ask you to accept the report since a response from management is not required.
I have one question.
Sure.
Do you have a target date for replacing FoxPro? I mean, when is that process going to be
Well,
completed? Be up and running with somebody new?
Well, it's in the process of selecting a vendor. From the timelines I've seen, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it would take 18 months to 2 years to implement it, the ERP system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's just for the first phase of the project. There's multiple phases of the project.
Sorry.
There's multiple phases of the project, so the first phase is scheduled to be about 2 years long. And there's additional phases for the project that cover different business areas. So it's going to be multi-year, 3-4 year project or so.
In the meantime, we continue to rely on FoxPro, which is not being supported by Microsoft.
Will be.
Somehow that sounds like a disconnect to me.
Well, there's not much of a choice otherwise, but I mean, it's functioning effectively. It's just that.
Yeah, in the meantime, we'll be currently using the FoxPro systems that we have. So we have people that are working on those systems and maintaining them and making any small enhancements or bug fixes as needed. So they'll suffice for what we need to do right now.
They're adequate for what we need to do right now.
Well, they're not adequate. They're not. That's why we're replacing them. So they're barely. Yeah, they're adequate enough, and we provide any additional features that the business absolutely needs. Along the way, knowing that there's going to be a new system coming. So.
Way to speed the process up.
It's an enormous task. We're talking about the entire agency's suite of applications. So there's a lot to do, and we don't want to just replace them. We want to make them better. So as I presented in other meetings and other updates to the board, looking to bring in a off-the-shelf software, and these tools are large software packages. And it's to replace all the different business functions that we do. We've had these systems for about 30 years, so we're trying to replace everything in one fell swoop, pretty much. So it's a big task.
Any comments or questions for Steve on the technology audit? Adam, please call the roll.
Now before all 5 committees.
Thank you.
The resolution of the audit committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency, and the Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation, approving internal audits, information technology audit report, assuming the first and second previously entered for all 5 committees. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
Item number 4, resolution approving audit committee's action plan for 2016. Harry.
Well, again, included in your materials is the action plan for 2016, which is similar to the action plan from the prior year, in which recommended the approval of the financial statements was done last year. The administrative budget and financial plans were approved. reviewed and approved various internal audit group audit reports, and approved the annual internal audit work plan, received information, including the independent auditor's report to management, recommended the approval of the single audit for the federal programs that Lou had discussed before, and the reappointment of Ernst & Young as the agency's internal auditors. Attached is the calendar for this year. There'll be a training related to accounting matters in April at the April Audit Committee meeting. Any recommendations for training items? Would be appreciated. Last year we did one on internal control. Also, there's an information item in here. I know I'm jumping ahead, but they're both in here, which is the internal audit, which is the Audit Committee's annual self-evaluation forms, which is hopefully we received at the end of February. I'd like to get that back from everybody. And the results of that will also be presented at the April meeting.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right. Adam, shall we?
Before all 5 committees is a resolution of the audit committees of the State of New York Mortgage Agency, the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the New York State Affordable Housing Corporation, the State of New York Municipal Bond Bank Agency, and the Tobacco Settlement Financing Corporation, approving an action plan for the period from January 1, 2016 through December 31, 2016. Assuming the first and second previously entered for all 5 committees, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Can you hang on 1 second?
Aye.
Motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
All right, item 5, is this a consent item?
Yes.
Adam? Item 5, resolution recommending approval of HFA audited supplementary information, parens, other financial information, or OFI, report. And unless there are comments or questions, Adam, am I correct, we're going to deem that to be approved?
Yeah, I think it's before the HFA committee, so no discussion, but a resolution of the audit committee of the New York State Housing Finance Agency reviewing and approving audited supplemental financial information report. For the HFA committee, assuming the first and second previously entered, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. For HFA. The motions are carried and the resolution adopted.
Item 6 is the 10th annual evaluation by the audit committee, which Mary alluded to a moment ago, and you were listed as the chief presenter to say that it's going to be discussed later.
And I was actually going to ask for you to return it to him by February 16. He was giving you some leeway beyond that, but if you could fax it to Gary, that'd be great.
All right. There being no unfinished business before the audit committees of the agencies, may we have motions and seconds to adjourn?
Assuming the first and second previously entered for all 5 committees, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motions are carried, the meetings are adjourned. The next audit committee meetings are scheduled to meet on Thursday, April 14, 2016. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Great job.